Hey, it is Scott with Zenby AI, and welcome to the Systems Are Sexy podcast. Today, I am joined by Sean Lahijani. He's the architect and founding principal of Anomaly Development. It's a firm that's redefining the role of owner's representation and product delivery in real estate development. Sean's worked on some major urban projects like Circa DTLA to high-end residential and commercial creative developments across California. What sets him apart is how he bridges the worlds of design, construction, and ownership, turning complex visions into efficient on time, on budget reality. So, Sean, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Scott. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about your transition to starting your own development company. What inspired that, and just to make that come to life? Because I think what we would try to focus on in this podcast is 0 to 1 is the hardest step when you start a new business. So I'm wondering what inspired that, and how you got everything off the ground.
Well, I always had a desire to do something on my own. Given the completion of a project with my last firm, I had just completed a soundstage in Glendale, California, and figured it was the right time to start my own business.
Gotcha. Okay. So I know the word anomaly implies doing things differently. How is your approach to development and owner's representation stand out within maybe like a traditional architecture or a project management firm?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of practices, they're based in kind of a finance first, dollars and cents first mindset. And I coming from an architectural background and always having a little bit of a creative streak, I like to think that I can appreciate some of the more creative sensibilities, whether it's for myself or for an owner who I'm serving, and try and entice that within them. And also blending that, of course, with trying to find economical solutions to their creative intent and wishes.
So if people aren't familiar with how your company operates, can you guys give us an overview of who your clients are and how you help them?
Yeah, so at this phase in my company's history, nearly all my clients are single family homeowners or house flippers slash developers. So these are people who maybe don't have experience with, hiring design teams, getting permits, vetting proposals from various contractors. And so what I try to do is just give them the information, run the analysis, distill, all the sense making so that they can make informed and confident decisions.
So you're involved in basically A to Z as far as the process goes. Someone hires you, and then what does that look like once they meet with you? Like, hey, let's go forward. What's the next step in the process for them?
The next step of the process is first defining budget and schedule. Those are obviously the two important things any owner is going to be concerned about. Starting to again develop those things, but that's not a static process. It's not a one and done process. Those things are continuously updated throughout the course of the project. Owners make changes. Things might get simplified or complicated in the delivery process. So we're always adjusting the expectation and just trying to be very eyes wide open about how we are proceeding forward at any phase of the project.
Got it. So you operate in a competitive market in Los Angeles, and I'm wondering how do you? I know your business is fairly new, but I wonder how you differentiate yourself from maybe from the larger firms or boutique players that you compete with.
Well, given my size, it is just all me. So I do bring a high level of touch and care. Everything I'm managing is directly seen and handled by me. So there's that. And again, I come from a commercial developer's background. For some people, some project managers, again, I don't know everyone's history, but maybe they come from a GC background, maybe they come from an architectural background strictly. But I really try to bring the developer's mindset to the projects I serve. And again, that goes hand in hand with continuously running analyses and also just talking through problems with owners, letting them know what their options are, asking the right questions of their vendors, getting all their vendors to be on the same playing field in terms of what the goals are and understanding what, uh, milestones and maybe aesthetic choices we're trying to hit. Right. So it's really trying to make sure everyone's on the same page. And yeah, that's basically it.
So as you start out, one of the goals here is to talk about scaling and how you customers find you, clients find you. What has been the best avenue for people learning about your services so you can get them down there and sit with them and show them the value that you bring?
Yeah, so I've been kind of experimenting with a couple of options. Word of mouth is definitely one way in which people have found me. I also try to post semi regularly on my Instagram page and try to provide useful information for owners, update that on my projects so that they can kind of see how the delivery unfolds and also kind of address general concerns within the industry or within real estate and construction, and trying to address some of the questions they might have. And more recently, I've begun doing kind of info lunches at brokerages. So I'll go to a brokerage, have a presentation prepared. I will, bring them lunch. I'll just talk about what it is I do because, you'd be surprised for people who are 10, 15, 20 years in the industry, they might not actually ever cross paths with an owner's rep. And even if they've been in the industry for that long, they might not know the first thing about, development and hiring a team and again, getting a project rolling. They just know how to transact a property. So I try to bring some transparency to that process, transparency to what I do. I give examples of projects I've delivered, challenges we faced and how we eventually overcome them.
Yeah, you had mentioned some projects. Could you maybe give us like one or two that you're proud of, or give us an idea of kind of the projects that you're working on, so people have your idea of what your scope is?
Yeah, so you touched on it a little bit, but first project I did, circa in downtown Los Angeles, I'm very proud of. A very visible project right across the street from the crypto arena and the convention center. So if you've ever been to downtown LA and you've been to those venues, if you walk out, you see circa with a giant LED wall, two glass towers, very huge, probably the biggest, no, definitely the biggest project I've worked on to date. Hopefully not the biggest in my career, but very honored to have been a part of that project. And then more recently, I worked on a soundstage in Glendale for East End Studios. It was more of a small scale soundstage on a 2.5 acre site, 35,000 square feet of stage area, about 40,000 square feet of support spaces between offices, lounge areas, green rooms, bathrooms, etc. And, that was also very fascinating, very different, very heavy demand in terms of power, lighting. It's really the black box where we make the magic of movies and shows happen, which was just really fascinating to be a part of in some way, shape, or form. And then more recently, I have a project I'm serving in Brentwood, California for a single family home flip. Is one of the smaller projects I've worked on in my history, but I'm, very proud of it. The owner is putting a lot of his own care and touches and creativity into the process, and he's very involved. And I will say, if anyone knows the kind of structure of a traditional project delivery. You see the owner on the top, and then they have the architect and the contractor with separate contractual relationships. And I always try to emphasize that the owner drives the ship. You still are relying on your consultants, your contractors, your vendors to deliver products, services, and results to you. But it is up to the owner to kind of keep everyone aligned on the same page and moving toward the same goal. And so I'm grateful that my client, despite me doing a lot of the heavy lifting and helping him with that, he does take it upon himself to be engaged in the process, be informed, and really has stake in delivering this project. So I must commend him there.
Yeah, communication's obviously important. Anybody that's been through a remodel knows that if you're not communicating, it can be frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say a client comes to you, whether it's a homeowner or a developer. What are kind of some of the biggest pain points or frustrations that they are facing?
Permitting probably are the biggest ones. Los Angeles is kind of notorious for its complicated permitting process. For anyone who's not familiar, you have the traditional building and safety department, LADBS, but what they do in their approval process is they give you a bunch of clearances that you have to satisfy with other agencies and bureaucracies within city government. So, depending on what your project is doing, you might trigger requirements where you have to get approval from Bureau of Engineering, LADWP, if you're enhancing your power supply, Bureau of Street Services, so on and so forth, right? It's up to you to kind of make sure you are hitting all of the marks for each agency while you are progressing your design and also trying to satisfy the general building and safety requirements. They don't really spell it out for you, and they kind of make you own that process and oversee it. And from time to time, agencies do conflict with one another, or what they require might go up against your project goals, maybe some aesthetic vision you're trying to achieve or what have you. So that really does complicate the process. But yeah, that would be the one major headache, I would say. owners tend to face in Los Angeles.
In the development process, where do you see the most, like, whether it's wasted time, money, or communication breakdown? Is it during the permitting process, or is another part of it?
I would say most of it is during the permitting and entitlement process. There's a lot of time and money spent there that could perhaps be much more simplified.
You had mentioned obviously the owner is driving the ship here when it comes to these projects, but obviously you're working with a sophisticated homeowner on whether it's a custom or luxury residential project. What advice do you give to them early on to make sure this project's going to go smoothly? Obviously, you mentioned by hey, you're in charge. Is there anything else you share with them to make sure it comes in on time and on budget?
Part of what I emphasize is in that kind of realm of advice is uh, efficient decision making, because if you don't make decisions efficiently, you slow down the project, and that's really the job of the owner ultimately. Beside that, vendor selection and making sure you are selecting the right team. So if you're doing a multifamily project, for instance, or a luxury residential home, for instance, you're not going to hire a firm that has almost all of its experience in delivering industrial projects. It's just not going to serve you. And you also want to hire someone who, again, a jurisdiction like LA has experience dealing with the permitting process and knows kind of in and out what might get triggered for the type of project you're working on, so that they can field those issues in advance.
Do you ever have to have conversations with homeowners to kind of maintain their maybe their design vision with also making sure it's financially viable to hit their budget?
Yes, yes. I would say, some clients, they're willing to pay, top dollar or near top dollar to get the design vision they want. But I'm dealing with another client, luxury home in Calabasas, and we're in the middle of, uh, I just got an email back, right? We're in the middle of determining what's going to be the solution for their entry door. And there's kind of a couple of solutions that were being offered, but they all have various impacts on the aesthetics, and that is, reflected in the cost, right? So we're trying to achieve a slimmer profile metal in the entry, the huge glazed entryway. But obviously, to go with a slimmer profile means, in most cases, higher costs. That's not always the case, but with the vendors that we've sourced, that's what we're seeing. So it's going to be a decision for the owner of, kind of both quantifying and qualifying the designs that they have, and, letting them know, look, if you pay this much, you get this much glazing versus this much metal, and so on and so forth. But again, presenting the options in a way that's easy to digest and easy for them to make a decision, evaluating all the options in front of them.
Got it. Well, so how about technology? How are you guys incorporating technology into your business, whether maybe it's project tracking, communication, design coordination?
Yeah, so Excel is your best friend. Yeah, you laugh because Excel is great for creating trackers. I'm also a huge proponent of just being able to use Microsoft Project, which is a fairly basic scheduling software. It does allow you to logically tie activities, which is its strength, as opposed to just a traditional milestone schedule, right? So if you write dates down, you don't know how these activities actually tie to one another and how they're dependent on one another. Microsoft Project, you get that. And then there's also much more robust options like P6. I've used those on past projects when I worked for other companies. Have not felt the need to go there yet, but who knows what the future holds. And also, obviously trying to incorporate AI, whether it's asking a question about code or even just ideating about, what kind of project you can do in a certain area. If you're given a certain plot of land, what you might be able to do with the land based on the zoning, and based on kind of your own personal criteria. Maybe you have a very small budget to work with, very low capital, but using that as a resource to kind of help you come up with ideas. And again, I really think I want to go back to the code one. I think that's so useful. There are even ChatGPT models that have the kind of code baked into it. Obviously, you want to always check what's referenced in the ChatGPT response, make sure it's actually accurately reflecting what the code has written, and read the language yourself. But again, I think it's been a very useful tool for me in my career.
So as your business grows, have you thought about, what internal systems or technologies you can implement to help scale your project load without compromising quality or the client experience?
Somewhat, I've begun to think of that. Obviously, with using AI, it kind of opens up the possibilities of what's out there. It's this marvelous technology that might solve all the problems, they say. And so it's quite powerful. So yeah, obviously trying to continue to figure out ways to use that. I know that it can be used for lead generation and kind of sales and follow up and things like that. Would like to begin experimenting with that more. And I know there's agent features. I have not. Again, AI is such a vast tool that I have not really begun to dive into that. But it's something that I am curious to see. Hey, can these how sophisticated are these agents? What can I really? What's the extent of what I can tell it to do? Can I tell it to kind of follow up with maybe a certain plan checker we're talking to? And will it know if I get an email from them ahead? It knows not to send an auto response on the day I've already automatically scheduled it to do so. These are things that I think would be really fascinating. And, as long as it can handle that information process well, I would definitely consider using it, but still have not just done the homework myself just yet.
Yeah, we talk to people that they go, "I wanna do it, I don't know where to start though, because it's a little intimidating, because there's so many tools out there and you essentially could do whatever you wanted to, it's just creating the workflow to make that happen."
Yeah, and I think it's just really being willing to experiment. It's a little scary to play with these tools when all of us, we went through the traditional education system, went to high school, maybe went to college, and now we're being asked to kind of like undo all these ways that we've learned to do things, right? And let it all be done by this machine. So it's a little uncomfortable to delegate that responsibility and know that it'll be done with the same accuracy, intent, if you will, or just level of completeness, right? So that's, I think, a challenge for people, but I think experimentation and just toying around with it will get you most of the way there.
So, what's the long-term vision for Anomaly? I mean, do you see it are you focused on LA? Do you wanna expand geographically, vertically integrating, or just other ideas as far as where you want to take the business?
Yeah, of course. Always thinking about how we can get bigger. For the time being, at this phase in the company's history, I want to make sure I'm getting more clients, serving the clients I have, making sure they're all satisfied, and getting a little bit more momentum here as we speak. Moving forward, I would love to source my own deals, find a piece of land, get the capital, acquire the capital, and then again, really deliver the project as I've done with all the other projects I've delivered in my past, right? And then I think kind of one step beyond that would be integrate, going back a step, so to speak, and integrate design into the practice and kind of being a design led development office. I think that would be really awesome. I think so with the potential of AI
Yeah.
and also parametric design, for those who are not familiar, kind of almost like coding your design. I think the combination of all of these technologies could be really awesome, and you could, really simplify. I don't want to say simplify, it's optimize how things are built and build magnificent structures for, lower and lower costs. So that would be awesome at the end of the day, but we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, I get it. You had mentioned some other projects. You've done some impressive ones. Are there any maybe like lessons or insights that you've taken from them to make it successful that you're bringing to Anomaly?
Yes. I mean, very simply attention to detail and trying to be as focused on you can as on every little piece of the project as you can. Kind of the more involvement that you as an owner can have, I think the better your project will turn out. And that can be from, designing a security system for a multifamily project, right? At Circa, I was very involved in that process and understanding how that would have kind of affect the user experience, whether you're a resident who lives in the building or you're someone who parked in the parking lot of the building for for an event at Staples or Crypto Arena or the convention center, and trying to just understand how do you not cross these paths, how do you kind of separate these populations and still provide a convenient and comfortable entry and exit experience for both types of users. So something like that can take up a lot of bandwidth, but does make all the difference for a project of that scale. And then that same attitude applies to everything, whether it's aesthetic choices, and then always kind of trying to bookend that entire process with the dollars and cents and the financial implications of the decisions that you're making. The other thing I would like to express is being able to accurately read your construction contract, especially if it's a complicated one, especially if it's a complicated project. understanding the difference between your contract and the subcontractor's contract and what that means for the obligations of each party, the owner, the contractor, and their subs. I also spent a considerable amount of time just reviewing change orders in my experience and being able to understand the responsibilities outlined in each contract made all the difference when you go back and you have to negotiate these things with people. It can get pretty nasty, it can get pretty aggressive, but being able to read that language and know again what the obligations are is very important, and it will help you lower your costs ultimately if you can do so successfully.
Absolutely. So if someone's interested in whether they're a homeowner, a developer, investor, and learning more about your company, what's the best way to go about doing that?
I would say head over to my Instagram. My tag is Anomaly Development. You can find me there. You can also head over to my webpage. And as always, you can just email me or call me directly. I'm a one man shop. I'm very easy to reach. Happy to share my information for those who are interested. But my webpage, all my information is actually on my webpage. You can head over to www.anomalydevelop.com and you can find me there. I'm also on LinkedIn as well. So if you want to connect on LinkedIn, I'm always happy to do so and chat about any projects you might be looking to take on or even just thinking about.
Well, thank you, Sean. We're excited for you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Scott. It's been a pleasure and I appreciate the opportunity.